And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest, greatest episode of the Shaving Points podcast. We are very excited to get into some draft prospects with you today,
1 week
among
away.
other things. Some what?
1 week away, baby.
1 week. Very excited. But before that, make sure you go follow us on all of our social media. Go like, subscribe, comment, be active with us. We'd love to hear back from you guys. My name is Quentin Crisco. You can find me on Twitter at BuckissStats. You can find the pod on Twitter at shaving_points. That's PTS_pod. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jay. How you doing today, Jay?
Doing fantastic. You can find me on Twitter at JMay56. Make sure to check out our website as well, where we're posting draft content there. We have a whole draft guide that Q will explain later in this episode.
The draft guide is dope. Go check it out. Go use it. It's sick. It was months of my life.
It is awesome. Check it out. Let us know what you think. And if you need some summer merch, we got you covered. Everything you need for summer. Go check it out. Let us know what you think. Interact with the boys. Subscribe to the website, and let's roll.
I just bought like 5 items from our store myself. Very excited to get them. So anyways, we have a special guest here today. NFL draft scout Michael Rochman is joining us on the show to talk through some prospects. Welcome to the show, Michael.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So why don't we just start off the show going through kind of your background, how you got into being a draft scout, how you got into journalism for it, and being a grinder of the tape, so to say.
Yeah, so, growing up, I was just a huge fan of both college football and NFL football, so it was natural that whenever the draft came around, I was always, tuned in and watching it, and eventually I just kind of realized that most other people didn't really care about the draft, and a lot of people were just there to watch the football, whether it was college or pro, but they didn't really watch the events, and for me, that was like one of the most exciting parts of it, finding these rookies, seeing how these college players made that jump to the NFL, and eventually, I realized like, hey, if I care about this and have so much interest in it, it's something that I should really start to make content on. Once I went to college, I really kind of took advantage of those opportunities, just finding opportunities and sites to write for. And I started with like this New York Giants based website and eventually have kind of worked my way up, still very early in my career, but now I'm working for a Texas Longhorns site, working for LandryFootball.com, which is Chris Landry, former NFL scout. Write for Lindy Sports Magazine, which is a nationally published magazine that goes, nationally, yeah, like I said, and then just have some projects of my own. So still very early in my career, still have a lot that I want to accomplish and stuff, but I'm happy with the progress I've made, and hopefully just keeps going up.
Yeah, man. So I actually I found you last year on a draft guide that you put out on Reddit, and I was reading through it and just kind of going like, man, this guy put together some good scouting reports. I wonder if you'll let him use them in my article. So I reached out to you. You let me use your details, and it was it's an impressive draft guide. And now, what is it that you're doing on YouTube now with the draft stuff?
Yeah, so a buddy of mine came to me and was like, look, I've seen all this NFL content on YouTube, but so many people will put out their analysis and it's these 20 to 30-minute videos where a lot of YouTube users are not going to be able to sit through that. So instead, he wanted to get this quick-hitting analysis. And obviously, both of us were huge into the draft, so we were like, all right, can we kind of make this easily digestible, quick-hitting NFL draft analysis YouTube channel? And, so far it's been doing well. We've gotten over 1,000 subscribers in just 2 months of work. It's been a lot of grinding, a lot of late nights putting some videos together, but we put out some very quick videos that a lot of people seem to love and seem to really be responding well to, and hopefully it can kind of grow the interest of the NFL draft just in total amongst all NFL fans.
That's awesome, man. So like how many games or like hours of tape do you grind per 2-minute video?
Man, I would say there's a lot that I watch just because it's so easy to just kind of get captured by the tape. And it's not necessarily where I'm just like, wow, I'm stuck in this.
Yeah.
But it's like you watch one game and you can probably make a video off of it, but you're like, all right, you can't just take one game because maybe it's a game where the QB threw 400 yards. You want to see some games where he struggles, some instances where maybe he went against a better defense with better prospects on it. So I usually try to at least get 3 per prospect, but really, if it's a quarterback, I mean, I'll watch every game that I can find on YouTube. Sometimes it'll be a full game. Sometimes I'll watch like an offensive cut. Shout out to Do a Barrel Roll on YouTube. He makes tons of draft cuts that are a lot more convenient than skipping through an entire like 3-hour game. But ultimately, I'll watch what I can whenever it comes to these prospects.
So, how often do you find yourself like, say that you want to watch Dontario Drummond, and you're like, man, I'm sitting here, I'm going to watch Dontario Drummond, but then you catch your eyes just keep looking at this edge rusher, and you're like, man, I'm supposed to be watching Dontario Drummond, but this guy's just, I got to keep watching him. Like, how often does something like that happen to you?
Yeah, there's times where I'll watch probably like 3/4 of a cut, and I'm just like, man, I'm realizing I'm just watching this football game instead of like watching Dontario Drummond, and I just have to like click back, and I'm like, I kind of hate it because like, man, I just watched all this, but at the same time, it's like, all right, at least I'm focusing on Drummond here. Speaking of Drummond, very talented wide receiver. He has some drop issues, but I really like him. I think the age is a little bit of a concern, just investing in a prospect like that's that old. But ultimately, I think there's some potential there for him to be a late round steal. So little insight there. Good name to drop.
I think I saw something today about him as a potential like big slot guy in the NFL, which isn't going to get drafted high, but can have some real value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really he stepped up in a major way because Elijah Moore left Ole Miss and there was plenty of targets to go around. Braylon Sanders and Dontario Drummond stepped up in a big way for Matt Corral to really continue success as a quarterback.
Yeah. You got anything you want to ask the man, Jaden? I've been hogging up the mic.
Yeah, so like one quick thing I'll ask, because I know you mentioned quarterback a second ago. This is one of the more recent drafts in history, I guess, that we don't really have a clear-cut number one going into the draft. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. Nobody really even knows how many quarterbacks will go in the draft. So I just kind of wanted I've heard every other take. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts and opinions on some of these quarterbacks coming in. Like, is Malik Willis the real deal? Does he really run a 4.3? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I personally, Malik Willis is far and away the quarterback one for me in this class. I think when you look at the tools that he offers, he has a cannon of an arm. He has some great scrambling ability. I think his internal clock still needs a lot of work. There's a lot of plays where he'll sit in that pocket for what feels like hours, and he'll just start scrambling back and taking terrible sacks, kind of Kyler Murray-esque in that regard. But ultimately, he has a lot of great moments on tape. You look at Lamar Jackson is so hard to defend for NFL defenses because, you try to bring up your defense and contain him on the outside, and there's times where maybe he doesn't get to make those downfield throws. Malik Willis has the arm to where the entire field's open for him to make those plays. So when that defense tries to come up and contain him on the outside, he's going to be able to launch that ball downfield. So, yes, there's some refinement needed, but in terms of the overall ceiling and overall game plan that you can create with a guy like Willis, I mean, the possibilities are endless, and that's why I really like him.
So you're saying he has you're saying that Willis has the arm to throw it deep out from the far side of the field on the run, right?
Yeah, he's got all the talent in the world to make some crazy throws that once he refines his game, assuming it happens, that's the big thing is can you polish him to where he becomes that quarterback? But assuming it does happen, I mean, he's going to be a headache to go against.
I agree with you. He is also my QB1. But do you think he'll actually be the first quarterback off the board? Or do you think one of these teams like Carolina or something maybe falls in love with a Kenny Pickett or something and jumps Willis?
Yeah, there's two guys that I feel like are the big contenders to go above Willis when it comes to draft day. Kenny Pickett, as we know, Matt Rule has a little bit of a connection with him. He committed to him at Temple when Rule was the head coach.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, he recruited Kenny Pickett as a high schooler. Kenny Pickett committed to Temple. Rule left for Baylor, and then Kenny Pickett flipped his commitment to Pittsburgh. So there's a little bit of connection there, and
Interesting.
Rule loves his guys. Another guy is Desmond Ridder. Personally, he's my quarterback 4. I wouldn't make that choice, but he's been rising, and we've seen that happen in a lot of draft seasons. We saw it with Daniel Jones, where Daniel Jones was this late first-round pick that a lot of people should keep an eye on. Then there's, the Giants like Daniel Jones. Keep an eye on him at 17. And then it's Daniel Jones, top 6 picks. So we see those kind of late blossoms where it's like, the NFL likes them more than media realizes. And then they just continue to make their way forward in the draft. And I think Desmond Ridder kind of is on that path.
You think he's climbing the draft board?
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Desmond Ridder ends up being the first quarterback off the board. Personally, I don't think I would do it. I get the upside, but I think I would more lean on Malik Willis to kind of accomplish that. But with the pattern that we've seen from past drafts, I think Desmond Ridder's kind of following that same path.
So odds are probably pretty freaking good on Desmond Ridder to be the first quarterback taken off the board. So you might want to go maybe sprinkle that a little bit right now if he's really rising.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He was at I think plus 2,500 as a week ago, and now he's down to plus 1,200. So I think some more people are starting to have that line of thought. Still, pretty good odds if it does happen. It's still a good payday, but definitely decreasing by the minute, it seems.
Yeah.
I feel like he, if you can get sold that Baker Mayfield is a culture changer and the Pied Piper, as they said, how is Desmond Ridder not a culture changer? A guy who came into Cincinnati, got a non-Power 5 team into the college playoff. I'm not advocating for him to be QB1, but you'd think that if some of these NFL scouts are thinking this guy's a culture changer, he's different, guys just listen to him, they follow him, Desmond Ridder has to fit that box a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In terms of sorry, go ahead.
You're good.
I was just going to say, in terms of off-field stuff, Desmond Ridder is about as easy to invest in as you can imagine. I mean, he's someone that was not just early to every practice, early to every meeting. He was sitting in on every coach's meeting. So he's a guy that, in terms of coach speak, in terms of all the intangibles and off-field stuff, everyone's going to love Ridder as a person. The question is, can you fix those accuracy issues on field? And I think a lot of coaches are willing to invest in themselves to be able to help him grow in that regard. And if you can do that, then I think you're working with what could be a very high caliber quarterback.
Josh Allen got more accurate somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Somehow he's the one. And I've said ever since we started this podcast, Josh Allen is going to get a lot of scouts fired over the next decade.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We got Michael over here just dropping truth bombs on us. Let's go ahead and jump into some of these D-line guys that we lined up to talk about. First up here, we got Matthew Butler, Tennessee. Why don't you tell us your thoughts on this young man?
Yeah, so Matthew Butler is a guy that I really like. When I was watching him last year for Tennessee, it was a little bit before the declaration deadline. He was an under-the-radar guy that had been kind of on the fence in regards to whether he'd declare or not. He decided to go back, and I think he had a really impressive season. Kind of still stayed under the radar, but turned in 5 sacks, 8.5 tackles for loss. Has a nice frame, nice length. A little bit undersized. Obviously, he's not yet over 300 pounds. I think that's something that could easily happen at the next level, but it's just something that, you want a little bit more size on him. But he really kind of blew up in the offseason part of things. He had some great performances in the Senior Bowl, really established himself as one of the better mid-round defensive lineman prospects in this class. When it comes to just consistent play-to-play performance, that's what I really like about Butler. He can position himself in the run game, hold his spot in the line, fill his gaps as you ask him to, but then he can also make plays as a pass rusher as well. And I think that well-roundedness is going to help him stick around in the league. A lot of these defensive linemen, you kind of look for these flashy players, but at the same time, you can't underestimate the guys that are just consistently turning up good results. And I feel like Matthew Butler does that and could very easily be a long-term, contributor in this league because of that. Yeah,
I think he's a guy who might get targeted by the Bears with Matt Eberflus and that running that. It's not a strict cover 2 anymore, but that cover 2 basics type defense. I think they need that 3 tech, and I think he fits it pretty well. Those explosiveness and speed traits that he's got are pretty enticing.
Yeah, and I always just like anybody out of the SEC.
Yeah, and a little fun fact about old Matt Butler here, he has this massive framed poster, not like a painting, but a poster that he just put in a frame of Rick Moranis hanging above his fireplace. The guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And he loves him.
Yeah, I mean, that's dedication.
Green flags
there.
all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't have trust issues. So.
All right. Next up here, we got the phonetic spelling on this one, so I have to get it right. Eyioma Uwazurike. It's a mouthful. He didn't have a nickname. I was about to say AKA, but I didn't find any nicknames for him. Which, side little rant, is so difficult to find college football players' nicknames. I wasted a day of my life on it.
Yeah, if you can't find it on those college bio sites, they're hard to come across.
Just DM them and ask, "Hey, do you have a nickname?"
Yeah, that probably would have been faster. But so what are your thoughts on Uwazurike here?
Yeah, so Uwazurike seems like the perfect fit to be this 3-4 defensive end that can also move around the defensive line. He has a size to potentially be a nose tackle at the NFL level. I think that's where I really like him, is just the fact that he offers such versatility. He has a great frame. I mean, not only is he 6'6", 316, but he has tremendous length. He shows off nice athleticism. He's able to produce. He's a little older. I mean, he's had some numerous years in college football with the Iowa State Cyclones, but I mean, he was a staple of that defense on the defensive line. Another guy that I think maybe isn't someone that you're watching and you're saying, man, this guy's extremely flashy, but he was making big-time plays in the backfield, turned in 9 sacks as a defensive tackle, 3-4 defensive end type, 12 tackles for loss. He's someone that was a leader for the defense. He has great frame. I think he works his weight extremely well because he's a little bit thin for being such a big guy, and I think that works well to his game. I think if he would have really tested fully rather than just doing mostly measurements with broad jump, he really would have been someone that blew it up because he's just an absolute stud. And I really like what he does just from game to game. I think he is going to be someone that disrupts the backfield consistently in the NFL. I think, you put him in a spot that runs 3-4, and I think he's going to be a great 3-4 defensive end. But if he's on a 4-3 team, I think he can rotate between, that 0 to 5 tech spot, and I think he'd do perfectly well. Maybe, there's limitations at the 5 tech, but I think ultimately he has everything you'd want to look for in these big body defensive tackles that makes him very valuable to bring in the later rounds of this draft.
Yeah, this guy haunts my dreams as a Texas Tech fan.
Yeah, watching Texas, he blew up the Longhorns all game.
He had a monster game against Tech. It was either last year or the year before, where I think he had like 6 or 7 tackles for a loss. We just couldn't stop him. He just destroyed us.
So
he's an absolute stud.
Every time I watch this guy and start reading his scouting reports, and I haven't seen any comps out there for this, so this is just my own comp, and maybe I'm insane, but I just see Akeem Hicks. I just see a guy in the Akeem Hicks mold who's just like tossing guys around and just this massive human being that is pushing around other massive human beings.
Just dirty in a good way. Just gets down and dirty.
Yeah.
In the mud type guy.
So, interesting fact about Uwazurike, actually. A few years ago, he bought a label maker, and he labeled everything in his house. Like his front door, the ketchup, his toothbrush.
He was putting
if
labels
there's something
on
he can label. Exactly. He labeled the label maker. I mean, that guy's organized. That's a guy you want in your building.
Yeah. It's definitely a guy that's going to come in and get the locker room in order immediately.
You probably don't have to hire anyone to make those locker room nameplates. He's got it all covered.
Yeah, it's beautiful. He does 2 jobs for the price of 1.
Yeah, and he does it for the love of the game.
All right. Next up here, we got Myjay Sanders. That is how you pronounce it. Not Myjay, as I've been saying for months. As I found out last week, it is Myjay. What do you think about Myjay?
Yeah, so Myjay Sanders is someone that, man, he's such a question mark because he plays at such a low weight, measuring in at like 230 pounds, like a 6'6" defensive end, someone that I think really works well as a stand-up rusher. He was kind of hand in the dirt 4-3 defensive end for Cincinnati. I think at the next level kind of let him use his length to his advantage. But he is a long guy. He's had some fluctuating weight issues. I believe there was reasoning for that, but I'm not 100% certain if I remember it just off the top of my head right now. Didn't have like the most outstanding measurables in terms of just body size altogether. He's a little bit short-limbed for being such a big guy, but ultimately he's a guy that is able to pass rush extremely well. Didn't turn in the stats that you kind of were hoping for after a 7-sack 2020 season. A lot of people were hoping he'd return, kind of turn in this great year. He only had 2.5 sacks, but still, I think he's someone that really offers a lot of pressure off the edge. He's someone that's able to get to the quarterback extremely efficiently. Again, lower sack total, but he was still pressuring the quarterback a ton. He was the focus of the defensive line or for offensive lines when they were going against Cincinnati. He's a guy that, I mean, you add some weight to him. I don't think the athleticism is going to be impacted. I think he has a body type that could easily add some weight. And I think right now, based on what we've seen from his college tape over the past few seasons, he's a pass rusher that is going to be able to contribute. And once you add that weight to him, I mean, he holds his ground well as like a 230-pounder. If you add 20, 30 pounds and he's not losing his athleticism, I think this is a guy that could be an absolute steal here in the 3rd, 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, so he's in this graphic here. I see 1.57 on the 10-yard shuttle. That is a decent amount above average for the edge rusher position. I mean, makes you think he has some room to add that weight and still keep his get off the ball. But one question I have on him: what do you think of his hands, his hand fighting, and his hand placement, accuracy, his punch? Because usually, when guys' arms are a little shorter, I feel like you can get by that if your hands are accurate, good, and strong. So what do you think about where he is with that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate his hands. I think that he has some solid ones, but I think it's more he got by with how quick they were rather than how refined they were. So technically speaking, just there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. But I think the overall speed and athleticism that he comes off the line with should be able to develop into more refined work off the edge. And I think it's something that will become a strength of his game. Right now, I think he definitely gets by with just being so fast, so like bendy off the edge. But I think in terms of hand usage, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Might as well call him Gumby. That's all I heard about Leonard Floyd the day he was drafted by every Bears outfit outlet. Was like, he's so bendy, he's like Gumby, and we never really saw it.
He had a good season.
I don't hate the idea of thinking that he could be a Leonard Floyd type in the NFL. And Leonard Floyd obviously wasn't this tremendous draft pick for the value that he got him at. But if you were getting Leonard Floyd in the 3rd, 4th round, I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, that's a great pick." But it's just the difference in values and how you play the draft board.
If you're getting Leonard Floyd on a vet minimum to chase a Super Bowl, it's a pretty good deal too.
Yeah.
Well, don't get me wrong here. I think Leonard Floyd is a very good football player. I just do not think he's a bendy edge rusher like he was sold out of the draft.
Yeah.
I think especially what he was doing in Chicago, I think he was doing a lot that doesn't show up on the stat sheets as far as containing the edge on the run and being able to drop into coverage. Like that scheme that Vic Fangio ran didn't work unless you had a Sam backer who could drop. And he was that, which means he didn't get a lot of sacks, but he did that. And he was definitely valuable there. And the pass rushing's shown up a little better in LA, but honestly, all his production is against Russell Wilson. Like over half his sacks there are against Russell Wilson on contained sacks where Russ is just running around for 10 minutes and then Leonard catches him. It's not like he's beating his guy off the snap that often. I just don't think that's his role in a defense. I don't think that's what you should ask him to do. But Myjay is a guy that I've heard so many mixed reviews on. You touched on that a little earlier. Like some people love him, some people think he's just a guy. Others think he's a dude. I mean, you can see that in the big board rankings we got here. His best rank is 100. His worst is 180. That's a pretty wide gap. Personally, I think a get off like that, the 10-yard shuttle, I think that's something that has value in the league, period, as an edge rusher. And even if he doesn't develop his game more, I think that will still have value as a situational guy at the least. But we mentioned his weight was a little light, but I've heard from inside sources that he's eaten nothing but Skyline chili for the past 6 months to get that weight up for the NFL.
That's how you do it. Maybe a few scoops of peanut butter in the chili as well. Definitely add some pounds on there.
Yeah, he's working on it. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's see who we got here. Oh, he got food poisoning in the lead up to the draft.
From all really?
That chili?
Yeah, I heard there was something where I heard he had like COVID or it was some sickness where he like dropped some weight prior to the combine. That's why he said he came in so light. Still, I don't think it would have knocked him down so much that he's like going from like 260 to 228. But I mean, if he's down like 7 pounds, I can understand why he's like annoyed with the results of it or something.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's kind of a flaw of like the combine and all that because like one little thing happens, a guy gets sick, and 7 pounds is a lot for looking at these guys. Like that's enough to throw you at the bottom of the draft board instead of moving up a few spots more where they initially had you. I'm gonna have to go back and look at his pro day weight. I'm curious now, but that's for another time. Next up here, another guy that I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on, and some people just love this guy, and I think some other people just haven't watched that much of his tape, honestly, is Arnold Ebuhkaytee.
Yeah, you look at Ebuhkaytee, and I mean, really, he just dominates as a pass rusher. That's the big thing is you're looking at a guy that I don't think there's any question as to whether or not he's going to contribute as a pass rusher in the NFL. I think he's that good. He just has so much juice in his get off. He has so much just physicality whenever it comes to just ripping guys out of the engagement and just getting to the quarterback. He is going to find ways to get to the quarterback. The big question is, can he be a run stuffer at the next level? Can he work his containment? Can he have some discipline on the edge? There's times where he flashes it, and then there's times where he just makes some big errors, and you have to kind of work through that. And, you know, there's guys that are able to kind of succeed as that type of player. Yannick Ngakoue is a very common comparison for him because, I mean, he kind of plays in that style where he is a great pass rusher, and NFL teams love him for it. But there are some teams that just simply will never have Yannick Ngakoue on their roster because they need run defense, and he doesn't offer a ton of it. Ebuhkaytee has the upside to where I think he's going to be a very good pass rusher. He absolutely blew up at Penn State. He transferred from Temple. Everyone was kind of curious because he was this athletic, very raw defensive end, and he blew up for 9 sacks. I think he had 18 tackles for loss. Just an absolute stud for Penn State, a school that's really done a tremendous job developing edge rushers. And Ebuhkaytee, I mean, when you watch him, he went in against some great prospects and was able to do some damage. I mean, Nicholas Petit-Frere was on his ass the entire game, frankly, because Ebuhkaytee was just messing him up all game. I mean, and
that
I like
Ohio State tape. I had 2 different friends like tell me they were watching that game for Petit-Frere and came away with different opinions of Ebuhkaytee. And like we're very unsure about Petit-Frere, but we're very sure about Ebuhkaytee from that game.
Yeah, I mean, he went just he was an entire menace that game, and it was just impressive to watch. He did it against NFL level competition. I mean, that's why I'm so confident that at the very least, when Ebuhkaytee, we're talking about him 5 years down the road and saying, "Oh, how was that draft pick?" I'm pretty confident that we're going to at least be saying, "Well, I mean, he's still a good pass rusher. He's still able to get like 5-6 sacks as a rotational guy." But I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to develop parts of his game to where he is a huge pick for being such a further down the road. Obviously, second, late first type guy isn't necessarily this huge sleeper, but I think for the value that he could really produce, I think there's definitely a lot of upside there.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people one like in their mocks and stuff like, oh, if we can land him in the second round, like we're gonna be so good. Like it, and he's sneaking right around there. Like it might even sneak into the first round at this point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's teams that need edge rushers, especially at the end of that first round. And I mean, a guy like Ebuhkaytee, where you're going to get pass rush production, I think it's definitely worth it. You look at teams like Kansas City, where you're trying to run Chris Jones as your edge rusher. I mean, you got to be desperate to get a guy like Ebuhkaytee, where you're having such issues getting to the quarterback from your edge position. yes, you still have some issues about can Ebuhkaytee be this run defense guy, but I mean, right now your best edge rusher is the corpse of Frank Clark or Chris Jones playing out of position. I mean, get Ebuhkaytee in there and make him your pass rush specialist, and you're going to get a lot more production on that defensive line.
Especially if Patrick Mahomes can keep scoring points.
Absolutely.
Even losing his receiver, because then other teams are going to have to pass the ball, and you don't have to worry about run defense.
Exactly.
Absolutely. One thing that stands out for him, for me, I mean, his agility is very strong. Like this guy can move laterally and change directions about as well as any edge in the class. But what's interesting is how well he did on the broad jump and the vertical, but not on the 10-yard split, which makes me wonder if he just had a rough go on the 40, because when you're jumping like that on the broad and the vertical, you're explosive. But it didn't show on that 10-yard split, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, he turned in a 1.69 10-yard split, which it's not bad. Like, it's above average, but like you said, when you're so explosive, you have those types of jumps that he turned in, you'd expect him to kind of have such an advantage at the 10-yard split. So the fact that he's turning in an above average with the jumps and explosiveness that he has, then you're kind of questioning, okay, does he have the get off that we're kind of seeing on tape, or is he having some issues where, maybe this isn't as good as we thought? But yeah, like you said, I would think it's just one of those issues where it's just kind of bad luck in that stance or something. But really, that is probably the only concern, because everything else, he was in the 90th percentile for testing and just an absolute monster in terms of what he can do as an athlete.
It almost makes you wonder if there's
ball in a sprinter stance either.
So. Yeah, I mean, it almost makes me wonder if there's something he can kind of change in his stance. I mean, like you said, a sprinter stance is different than a D-line stance. That's probably part of it. But his length is ridiculous as well. Like, he can just get into the blockers, which is one thing that I always care about for these edge rushers and just D-line in general, how well they can use that spacing from their arms to lock out and create that space and time for them to set up their move or get into their move.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's someone that has pretty impressive length. I think the size is really the only question mark, because you're kind of hoping that he sticks in that stance. I think he's a little bit slow out of his stance whenever it comes to working with his hand in the dirt. So I think stand-up roll is certainly his best position. But ultimately, I mean, we've seen guys like Joseph Osai kind of have that slow out of his stance type work, but still get drafted fairly high, and even in positions that weren't necessarily the stand-up roll, just because it's something that I think is pretty coachable to where I'm not too concerned about it. But yeah, I mean, the size is the big question mark. 6'2", 250, not necessarily the biggest of edge rushers, and I think that's something that will be a little bit of a concern, and maybe why he's kind of dropped a little bit more as like a late first, early second type guy. But still, like you guys have said, I mean, there's just tremendous pass rush ability to where the upside here is one that a lot of teams can't ignore.
So, little fun fact I got when I was going through Silver Spring, Maryland, his hometown. Arnold here is actually the reigning underground rap battle champion of Silver Spring, Maryland.
It makes sense since he's quick on his feet.
Yeah. All right. So those are the prospect profiles that we had for today. But we're going to go ahead and talk a few props with you. So first
Best
one, and these are just, I've been kind of tracking some that I've been hearing, like writing them down. And these are just the ones that I've written down so far. A few of them aren't even available on my book yet, but I hope they will be, because I like them all. So the first one here was Chris Olave under 17.5. So he'll be picked before the 18th pick. What do you think about that?
So the big rumor right now is that the Commanders absolutely love Chris Olave. They've met with him. I think it's been 5 times now. They are rumored to be pretty much between Kyle Hamilton and the Ohio State wide receivers. So, assuming that, let's say Garrett Wilson goes 8, it would then be between Kyle Hamilton and Chris Olave. Now, I think they would go Kyle Hamilton, but the odds are there. So I mean, getting what is most likely going to be maybe the 11th pick or maybe the next 6 picks, where Philadelphia would probably love to have a guy like Olave because he's a much better fit for that RPO offense than maybe like a guy like Drake London, who's more this physical jump ball type wide receiver. I mean, he fits what the NFL is going to like. I think the NFL is a lot higher on Olave than a lot of media recognizes because, I mean, Olave at times can be a little unflashy. He's just this very safe, very dependable receiver, great route running ability, kind of I'm not making the comparison. I don't want this to be on record as, oh, he compared him to one of the greats of the game, but similar to Justin Jefferson coming out, where Justin Jefferson was just this dependable slot receiver for LSU that kind of moved where needed. He wasn't necessarily the number one guy on his team, but he was still just kind of doing his job, able to produce at big times and big moments. Chris Olave does a lot of the same, and I think the NFL is going to really value that, really value the experience that he brings. And I think when you're looking at the just wide receiver class, floor is one of the big things that you want to be able to have that. And Olave probably has the highest floor out of almost anyone in this class.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of Amari Cooper in him. He's got the speed to take the top off if he needs to, but he's an excellent, crisp route runner. Doesn't drop a whole lot of passes. Does his job well. A lot like I thought Cooper coming out, getting drafted by the Raiders. So
yeah,
that's who I like. That's who I give a lot like.
I always love a prospect who lives in the details. And I feel like that's Olave to a T. And the fact that he runs whatever he ran, like a 4.38 or something like that, only makes it better.
He ran like a 4.27, and everybody was freaking out. And then the official time came in like almost like a tenth of a second slower. And I was like, oh, that makes more sense. Like,
yeah, Olave has been one of the guys that, I mean, you've probably seen it more than anyone as a Bears fan. A lot of people are like, oh, get him with Justin Fields. And it's like, man, I don't think he's going to get all the way there. Like, this is someone that he's just such a safe pick.
I think the absolute furthest he goes in the draft is Dallas. And that's
so. I'm not proud of this, but I was actually part of a movement to try to trash Chris Olave's name so he could drop to pick 39.
Hey, I respect it. You know, Kayvon Thibodeau, there's been rumors that he's like
your job as a fan.
You know, Thibodeau's been rumored to be this like off-field concern. You know, let him go to 21. Patriots, you know, I guess I'll settle for it. Not worth a top 20 pick, though, for sure.
Speaking of which, how far do you think it's possible for Thibodeau to fall?
Man, it's hard to see him falling past Atlanta. I think when you're looking at teams like that where, you know, Atlanta, Houston, where you have these 8-13 pick and you just have to kind of get the talent, a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau is just such an easy contributor, such a safe bet to be like a high-end contributor, to where these teams are going to say, look, you know, let's not be foolish here. If it doesn't work out, we have plenty of time to make our rebuild happen. So I think that's probably the absolute floor. Based on a lot of rumors, though, it sounds like Detroit is very much just okay with him if he's there at 2. They're more than happy to take him. Sounds like it's between Trayvon Walker and Hutch for number 1, but I think it's going to be Thibodeau number 2, unless maybe Hutchinson's available.
Do you think Hutchinson number 1?
I think Hutchinson number 1. Yeah, I don't buy I don't buy Trayvon Walker that much. I do know there's smoke, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think there's a lot of upside there. But what's up?
I've seen him linked to Neal a lot as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Evan Neal's my top prospect in this class. I love him, but really the main guy that I've heard for offensive linemen is Ekwonu. Apparently, Doug Peterson is infatuated with his game, but has been kind of overruled by the rest of the front office. But I think there's a lot there in terms of just talent for Evan Neal, to where if the Jaguars picked him, I would have zero issue with it at all. He's my top prospect in this class. You look at his overall base strength and flexibility up top. I mean, he does it all as a tackle.
I've always been under the impression that they're going O-line no matter what with that first pick, or trading out of it. I think it'd be weird to see Hutchinson go 1 with. So
Jacksonville actually has pretty solid depth on their O-line right now. That's the thing that makes it tough.
Yeah, they seem to be high on Walker Little right now. I'm not sure what the plan is for Cam Robinson long term, but they did bring him back for another season. I think the big question mark for them is Yeah, figuring out what happens on the interior. Ben Barch at left guard is kind of the question mark, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone that's invested in like a Cameron Jurgens or Cole Strange maybe in those middle rounds. But I think looking overall at the tackle spots, they seem kind of set. I mean, again, I think Ekwonu and Neal are talented enough to where if they made that pick, I'm not going to be one of the people complaining about it or roasting the Jags about it. But from what I've heard, it sounds like they're set on one of the edge rushers.
So before the show, we were talking a little bit about Kenny Green versus Ion Johnson, and I get a little bit of the same like argument in my head about Ekwonu versus Neal of like, man, I'm not sure their upside is all that different, but one guy is closer to it than the other, and like it's just like Ekwonu is definitely more exciting upside, but like I feel like both their upsides are pretty similar. And Evan Neal is just a much safer pick.
Yeah. I love Evan Neal in this draft.
Yeah, I think Neal's an absolute stud. I mean, when you watch him, the body frame alone is enough to get excited about. But the fact that he is just such a good mover, he moves people out of the way in the run game. He's a tremendous run blocker. But then in the passing game, yes, he needs to work on his balance. He has some plays where he kind of just works over his feet too far and he gets thrown off balance and he kind of gives up the rusher. But ultimately, there's times where he'll start to fall backwards, like be pushed back with his upper body, and he still finds a way to recover and gain momentum. And that's insane flexibility, insane upper body strength that you don't see out of most offensive tackles. Even some of the higher offensive tackles in this like NFL, you don't see them do plays like that. So Evan Neal has all the traits and the makings of really an all-pro offensive tackle. I know that's something that a lot of people don't share the opinion of, but I think 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we're going to be talking about Evan Neal as one of the premier tackles in the NFL.
I mean, we just saw a guy go to Tampa and do it year one, too, so it's not like it's unheard of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Another prop here for you. Nakobe Dean over 28.5. So pick 29th or later.
I'm going under. I think this linebacker class as a whole is going to slip a little bit. I'm not even sold on Devin Lloyd, who's been like considered the consensus number one linebacker. I'm not sold that any linebacker goes in the first round. Like if you were to say 1.5 over under for linebackers, I'd probably take the under for that as well. Like I think that this class as a whole, it's not even bad, but I think the entire top of it is just kind of jumbled as like mid to late first round kind of guys. So when there's like 10 of those options, or there's maybe, 3 remaining of the wide receivers that you like, or there's a limited guard class that you like, or maybe you're more invested in trying to figure out what you can do with a Trevor Penning, you're going to go with those guys and then play the board later for your linebackers that are all kind of similar levels. And real quick, sorry, I didn't mean to keep speaking over you, but
you're good.
Troy Anderson is a guy that I think is an absolute stud at the linebacker position.
Oh, dude.
He's
You're speaking to my heart right now.
And I think he is an excellent fit for the Bears. I think, when you look at what they did with Darius Leonard, and I know they're not the same prospect, but I think looking at that 48 pick, I assume the first, second rounder, they'll go on the offensive line or something to help Justin Fields. But with that second rounder, pick Troy Anderson, develop him, let him work with one of the best linebacker coaches in the NFL and see what he becomes, because I think he is an absolute stud. My linebacker one in this class.
Dude, you are preaching to the choir right now. I love Troy Anderson, and I am very upset that he's moving up boards fast right now because I thought I found like the steal of the draft, and now he's just like shooting up. And he was like a 4th rounder 2 weeks ago. Now he's a 2nd rounder, and it's like, man, who let the secret out?
Hey, but on the bright side, it's better that he goes before your second round pick rather than it comes around and then you just don't take him altogether. So then you can at least be like, oh, we would have got him if he was there.
Yeah, that's the worst part.
Yeah.
That's the worst part of the draft process is like you just imagine this one prospect going to a certain team and you're like, it's so perfect. Like it needs to happen. And then it just doesn't. And you're like, ah.
It happened with, I was on the Christian Watson bandwagon early too. And now it's like, I've seen him go from a 4th round pick to like an early 2nd, late 1st. And it's just like, man, y'all gotta keep quiet.
Yeah, it was like a few years ago. Quentin was telling me about a guy out of Central or Colorado State. He was like, "This Michael Gallup kid, he's really good. Like, I really want the Bears to get him." And so I started looking into him, and the Cowboys got him, and I was like stoked. And then he's just turned into a stud since then.
You should preface that with the only receiver in that class I liked more was Anthony Miller, who has not worked out. So, let's see. This next one's really interesting, and one that I could really get behind is
so
Daxton.
Clarification. You like over 28.5 for Nakobe Dean? Like
I think he goes later than 28.5.
Okay,
yeah, I think
cool.
I think he slips into that second round, maybe to that Giants first second round pick. I think he's a good fit for like a Martindale type defense where you kind of don't mind his size and let him kind of fly around.
I think you said under the first time, but then you talked about him. Then you talked about him going later, so I was
worse
like,
than 28.
yeah. So I was just getting
so
some clarification there.
I heard on on another podcast yesterday, I think, that there might be some medical issues there with Dean that aren't as well known, which is one of the reasons why they said they liked this one and why I wrote it down as one that I might like. So this next one here, Daxton Hill to be picked in the first round. And this is one I can definitely get behind, but what do you think?
I don't think it happens. I like Daxton Hill a little bit. My thing with Daxton Hill is right now he is a ball of clay entirely. I don't think he has yet established himself as a free safety like he's currently kind of set as a prospect as. I think he's established himself as a solid slot defender, but there's still plenty of work in that regard. Slot defenders aren't necessarily going to be put on this table of, oh, we need to get them in the first round. Personally, for me, I think he projects best as an outside cornerback at the next level. Fitting in a kind of corner two heavy type defense where you kind of allow him that underneath space, let him react to the play, let him blow up some receivers, be a great tackler on the outside. I think right now the instincts as a free safety still needs a lot of work. I think he's a good slot defender. He's versatile. That's going to be intriguing, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a first-round pick. But personally, I see a lot of similarities to Demarius Randall, a similar prospect who kind of had that cornerback safety career. And, to start out his career, he looked pretty solid and promising, but then things kind of fell apart. I think for Daxton Hill, getting him solidified into one role, trying to figure out what that is early, and then developing him from that spot, I think that's going to be one of the most crucial things for him. But when it comes to just guys in this class, I don't know if I think that he's high enough to where I'd put him in the first round. I think you're looking at guys like Lewis Seen, a strong safety maybe, but definitely someone that I think has showcased the athleticism. And then guys like Nick Cross, I think, are a little bit sneaky to potentially be risers in the safety class. That's one of the hardest things about the NFL draft is positions like center and safety seem to have these late blooms in terms of draft stock, so we don't really get the greatest idea of where they'll fall in the class. But for a guy like Daxton Hill, I think there's just so much question mark surrounding what he's going to be at the next level that I think there's still a lot left on the table of just I don't trust that a whole front office is going to be in agreement that that's the guy to go with.
I do think we're about 2 to 3 years away from that hybrid safety linebacker role being one of the highest paid positions on a defense. So if you can get on the trend early, like Keanu Neal type, like kind of what Jabril Peppers does, somebody who can cover but can tackle like a linebacker that can cover that slot inside receiver with all these 4 and 5 wideout sets that we're getting thrown at us these days. I think that hybrid type is going to be one of the most valuable positions in football within 3 to 4 years. So if you can grab a guy like that and you can actually develop a specific role for him in your defense, I think it could be tremendously valuable going forward. But I think we're still a couple of years away from that.
Yeah, and real quick, I just want to say, while I do think that he projects best as like an outside corner in that like kind of heavy cover 2 zone, I don't think the NFL is going to agree with me. I think they're going to try to stick him back at free safety, work him between the safety spots and down in that slot corner position like he played for Michigan. Just personally, I think, kind of similar to that Chicago defense, Indy defense type style, if you kind of put him in that position where he's able to more just like operate in this shallow zone where he can really kind of blow up defenders, I think he offers a lot in that regard. But yeah, I think ultimately the NFL is going to try to take advantage of the range that he can offer, the athleticism that he brings to the table. And, that's why I think there's still certainly a possibility that he goes in the first round. Just, I don't know, based on my evaluation, and I know that's kind of the kryptonite when it comes to predicting these things, because you always kind of get biased to like how you feel, and you're like, oh, the NFL probably
it only takes one team to fall in love with them.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised if some teams are way higher on Daxton Hill. I mean, Philadelphia, who's in like the middle of the first, has been heavily rumored to like him a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised. Just personally, I feel like there's still a lot of question marks in his game, a lot of refinement that's needed, and I think that's why some teams may wait on him a little bit. And I think he could be like a second round pick, but I mean, obviously, you kind of implied that you think he's a first rounder. I'd love to hear your thought process on it, because I definitely do think that there's a possibility.
So ultimately, I think almost to what Jayden was saying, that versatility to be able, I mean, teams are playing in nickel, 60, 70% of the time, depending on the team. Like, I think that versatility to come down and play the nickel and play it well is very valuable for a safety, especially a guy who, I mean, maybe he won't be a free safety at the next level. Maybe he will. I don't think he's a guy that you're going to be putting just back in a single high and saying this is your center field. But I think he's a guy who can play a lot of different roles, and with the right defensive coordinator, can really shine. Not unlike Jalen Petre out of Baylor, but I think Daxton Hill is a lot more capable of playing a defined role than Petre is right now. So ultimately, it's really just the versatility that I really like from him, and I think that slot cover guy is becoming more and more valuable in the league, and some teams might try to get ahead of a trend there. But honestly, I love to hear a differing take, because that gives me something to think about,
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, Daxton Hill has been a guy that's been like talked about in this first round, and I think this is a class where there's some valuable free safety prospects, but a lot of guys don't offer that athleticism like expected. I mean, Kyle Hamilton obviously disappointed a little bit with his 40-yard dash time, but he's still going to be a top, 20 pick at least, I would assume. There's some guys that were mid-round guys that were hyped, like Verone McKinley, but he ended up running a little bit slower. So the free safety talent has kind of gotten a little bit lower in terms of can they be that free safety, that ability to work single high. And I think Daxton Hill still has that potential to where if there's a team that's like, hey, we want someone that's going to be able to play that for us, I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a lot of projection, but still belief in him to be that guy. And in turn, he goes in the first round.
That's a Jerry Jones type of move, fall in love with a guy like that, and then just go take him at 23. So
the scouting safeties are so intriguing to me, because it's like, it's so difficult to know what this guy's job was on any given play, who to assign blame for when you're just talking about safety who's back there, essentially trying to blanket the back end of the field, and like it's so reliant on every other position on the defense that I personally think it's so hard to assess the play at that position as well. What do you think about that? Like, what do you look for when you're scouting safeties? What are kind of some of the things you key in on?
Yeah, so the big thing is trying to figure out what role they're going to be playing. I mean, if they're a free safety or strong safety is going to be huge. You look at guys like Kyle Hamilton, and they can kind of play all the way from safety to slot corner to linebacker, strong safety, whatever. But then there's guys like Lewis Cine, who's kind of only been a strong safety. Yes, he's gotten some free safety work, but I mean, for the most part, he's probably going to be a strong safety at the next level. And you have to kind of determine that role. So from there, if they're a strong safety, are they this guy that's just playing this, split field safety zone look, and they're just making open field tackles, but they aren't really working up? Then there's going to be a question of versatility, because, I mean, strong safeties now, you can't just be a guy that's going to be playing cover 2 zone, working in the open field, and that's it, but you can't really move up. You can't be a slot defender. Then you're going to drop because of it. So you have to find guys that can play in the box, play in the slot, move around to both safety spots. And that's the guys that get the value. One of my favorite prospects that has kind of risen up lately is Nick Cross. He's a guy that I think kind of has that ability to play both spots. There's still some questions, though, on if he can kind of play in the box type look. Can he make those plays as a physical player? And I think that's something that for him, he's going to have to prove that, but there's definitely the athletic upside that he showed with the testing to potentially be that free safety type guy. For a deep cut safety that I really like Tariq Carpenter. He was a cornerback for Georgia Tech. Currently weighing, I think, 230 pounds now. Might be trying to make the move to linebacker instead of going to safety. But ultimately, you watch Jeremy Chin at Southern Illinois, and a lot of his tape came at corner because, he was just one of the best athletes on the field, and you just kind of try to put them in that spot where they can make the biggest impact, and that's what Chin was able to do. For Carpenter, he was playing cornerback for Georgia Tech at 6'4", 220 pounds. I think he has the speed, the athleticism to kind of move around and play in that hybrid role all over the field. This is someone that's going to be like a 7th-round pick, so it's still very much a dart throw, but I think if you're looking for like that late-round kind of boom guy, Tariq Carpenter is a guy to keep an eye on. But to answer your original question of what I look for, you kind of have to find either do they offer this one elite trait or do they offer enough versatility to fill in all over? And, guys like Kyle Hamilton, maybe they don't have the elite range, but he can play almost every position in your defense and play it well. So, that impact is just unimaginable. And I think the safety position as a whole is just extremely underrated across the NFL because those guys make huge plays just nonstop for NFL teams and don't get enough credit for it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you one more question here on props. And the prop here is Sauce Gardner, 7.5, over, under. So my question for you is, how high can Sauce go?
I think Sauce can go as high as number 3. I think that's an easy under. From what I've seen, it sounds like New York's probably going to try to get him at 7 because I think they know Carolina is definitely going to be going quarterback or offensive tackle. But, you look at Houston has all these Patriots in their front office, right? And you look at the Patriots, they heavily invested in corner when they were kind of building up their defense. They went and got Stephon Gilmore, made him one of the highest paid cornerbacks in the NFL at the time. They got J.C. Jackson. Obviously, they let him walk. But ultimately, corner was huge for them. Brian Flores goes to Miami. What does he do? He pays Byron Jones. He gets the extension for Xavier Howard. He spends a first-round pick on Noah Igbenogany. Corner is important.
One of my draft misses.
Yeah, me too.
I loved him. I loved him.
Yeah, absolute miss for me as well. I'm with you right there. But, these teams care. The history indicates that these organizations that have these Patriots ties are so invested in these corners that you can kind of put on an island and that can cover downfield and can be the star lockdown corner. Now, Houston's been rumored to be heavily in on offensive line, but there's also been a lot of talk that Titus Howard doesn't want to play guard. So if they have Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard and they're confident in that, then Ahmad Gardner is so easily in play at number 3. I think he's an absolute stud. I think
he's my favorite player in this draft.
Yeah, I think in terms of where he ranks for me, I think he was number 2 or number 3. It was him and Hamilton kind of tossed up and forth, back and forth between those two spots. But the size, the ability that Gardner offers, the IQ that he plays with, the awareness that he plays with, he does it all as a corner. And I think, a lot of people are talking about just the stiffness, I guess, but he moves extremely well for what length he has to offer. Now, does that mean that I'm making an exception for him? No, it's not. He covers the space that other corners cover. He just doesn't move as fluidly as them because he is this long-limbed corner, but he still covers that same space extremely well. And the upside that he has is tremendous. If he gets past 7, I don't know what the NFL's doing.
Yeah. One thing with Houston that's really interesting to me is like you said, a bunch of Patriots guys in the front office clearly value cornerbacks, and a head coach who doesn't when he's running that Tampa 2 variations and really very heavily predicated on giving his cornerbacks help. How much does he want to invest in number 3 pick on a corner? But also, how much say does he even have in that messed up situation in Houston?
Yeah,
go ahead, Jeff.
You're forgetting that McCown is actually the head coach, and they just couldn't get away with giving McCown the job right now. So Lovie Smith will be the coach for a year until McCown's the coach next year. So if McCown wants to go get a corner, that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I'm so confused on what is Lovie Smith going to be your long-term answer? Do you kind of plan your team around Lovie, or are you just saying, okay, ride our ship for a year? You know, we thought firing David Coley would be fine, and then it just blew up, or what? But now, I mean, this is just such an interesting situation. I feel like the Texans aren't going to make moves based around Lovie, but I mean, at the same time, you can't just be like, oh yeah, we don't care what you run. We're just going to draft whoever, because I mean, ideally Lovie Smith is, you know, this great coach that succeeds for you, and you can't like make this plan of Lovie just 1 year. So we'll see what happens.
So was David Coley.
Yeah. Man, I think David Coley
overperformed.
He did a heck of a job.
He did. He
overperformed. They're like, nah,
the expectation was like 0-17, and I mean they weren't good this year, but for the expectation, it was impressive.
They were out there putting on a show for the boys every week.
All right.
One of the wildest hires.
Brandon Cooks looking like an all-pro.
Yeah. 2 more things for you. First up, who are your top 5 players that you expect to go in the 4th round or later?
So the first one that I want to touch on is SMU wide receiver Danny Gray. This is someone that I think just does it all. I mean,
we both immediately lit up.
Yeah, he's my number 2 slot receiver right now. I have him just below Jahan Dotson. I have him above guys like John Mechie, above guys like Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he's an absolute stud. He's a top 10 wide receiver for me in this class. Going to be a guy that goes probably day 3, but I think, you know, he does it all. I mean, he's able to make plays in the air. He's able to make plays in the slot. He can play inside, outside. He's gotten a solid enough frame. He's not like your big body, like 6'3", 210-pound guy, but I mean, he's like 5'11", 6 foot. So he's good enough size to where he can make it work wherever. He moves with such fluidity. He moves with nuance. He's such a refined player for being such a like mid-major school receiver that kind of went under the radar as well as he did. A lot of attention, even as early as last year, was going to guys like Reggie Robertson or Rashee Rice on the team. And Danny Gray was, I mean, the stud of that team. I think he's an absolute monster. And if you are a team that needs wide receiver help, and, you know, maybe you're a team like the Bears where you don't have a first-round pick, or you just don't have the capital, or you have way too many needs elsewhere, you know, add a guy like Danny Gray, reap the rewards, and, you know, I think he's going to be an absolute stud.
Reminds me a lot of Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much upside there for him. Another guy that I really like is Isaiah Polamau, safety out of USC, a guy that for a long time no one knew if he was in this class, and then he was just
I don't even know. He's not. I haven't even seen him on a single big board, and I've been tracking these big boards like religiously.
Yeah, January came, and the only source on him was an article that said he was returning. So everyone was just like, okay, you know, we have no idea. We haven't heard a declaration. We're gonna take him off the big board. I did the same thing. Then he shows up at the USC Pro Day, and no one's talking about it. This was a guy that seemed to be like a 3rd-round prospect, and now he's in the draft just randomly, and people are kind of expecting Isaiah Polamau. He's actually Troy Polamalu's nephew. Yeah, so a little bit of NFL heritage there, but I mean, he's a guy that has tremendous size. He played free safety for USC. He played strong safety. He's physical. He's got great size. I think he's someone that, you know, you get him in that 4th, 5th round, I think it's an absolute steal. He's someone that just, I mean, the safety play in this class as a whole, I like guys like Smoke Monday, Isaiah Polamau, Tariq Carpenter, like I said. I mean, there are some great safeties in this class that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, and I think the NFL probably feels the same way, where they are letting some great talent slide by. But, I mean, if you're able to add one of these pieces late, I think there's plenty of upside there. You know, for late-round corners, I really like Chris Steele and Kyler McMichael. You know, the corner class as a whole has already been talked about. He's out of North Carolina. He worked opposite.
I hadn't heard that name either.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that he didn't get a lot of love. He was at the, I think, collegiate showcase, so definitely like a lower tier player in terms of just media attention. But I mean, he has some nice fluidity, some nice size. He's about 5'11", 190, plays pretty solid. He has a stout frame to where he makes some nice plays on the ball. I think he is definitely worth the late round flyer to see what you can do with him. Ultimately, you know, there's always going to be questions about these late round guys. I think Chris Steele is another one that, I mean, he's got all the potential in the world. I think he's a tremendous fit for a team like the Saints, where you kind of let him work downfield in these cover 3 looks, but you don't maybe have him track guys across the field. But ultimately, I mean, the play on the ball, the size, and the receiving kind of ability as a corner just stands out, and I think that's why those guys are late round sleepers for me. I'm trying to think. My internet's gone out on my computer, so I'm trying to think just off the dome. Pierre Strong Jr., running back out of South Dakota State, is a guy that I absolutely love. I think he's got tremendous breakaway speed. I want to see a little bit more in terms of contact balance out of him. I think, a lot of the magic when it comes to running backs is ability to create yardage on your own. He's able to do that in terms of finding openings and creating space, but I think he needs to be a little bit stronger with his lower body, break some more tackles, but ultimately he's got some just outstanding abilities that can really turn into some just dominant play. And the last guy that I want to talk on is offensive tackle Obinna Eze, the offensive tackle for TCU, 36-inch arms, 36 and 1/8 actually, with a basketball background. He moves pretty well. I think this is a guy that you definitely don't bring in as like this like expected, day one starter. But if you have a team where maybe your offensive tackle is gone in a year or two and you want someone that you can kind of bring in, see what you can make of them, he has the movement skills to get into the second level pretty well. He has the size and frame, 6'6", 321 with 36-inch arms. I mean, he's got all the size you could ask for. If you can make it work to where, the refinement is there, I think there's a lot of similarities to a guy like George Fant where, yes, the rawness was an issue for the early part of his career, but eventually it kind of turned into a very solidified starting offensive tackle, and I think Eze has that same potential.
Interesting. Eze's a guy who I'd seen on draft boards and looked a little bit at, but he's not a guy who I'd heard a lot of. So you're throwing out some real good names here, some original content. Kudos to you. I'll look at these guys some more.
I love it. Hey, so I have
it's great. You don't have the groupthink on it, which is outstanding.
So I have a question going back to last year's draft. As a Cowboys fan, how upset should I be that Kelvin Joseph might be an accessory to murder and not maybe never play football again?
When the Cowboys drafted
we didn't
Kelvin
see much
Joseph,
of him last year.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit of a reach, honestly. I think he's a little bit.
I wanted Samuel Jr. in that spot.
Yeah, I love Asante Samuel Jr. I thought he was extremely underrated. And,
dude, I forgot that they took Joseph that early.
Yeah,
like I remember texting with you about it, Jayden, and being like, "Why would they risk it on this guy this early?" But I didn't think it was that before Samuel. God dang.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
It was extremely early. And then they went and drafted. Yeah, and then they went and drafted Nashawn Wright pretty early as well. Like this was
that was a Dan Quinn typical. I want a 6'4" guy in my secondary.
But I want a pterodactyl back there.
I like Nashawn Wright. I still think he can be a player, but in the 4th round, it was still pretty early.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprising draft for the Cowboys, but it was definitely one of those things where it just showed that teams have different values and different kind of assessments of these players based on their own scheme and what they run. And
they let Dan Quinn basically draft every person he wanted last year.
Hey, it worked out. I mean, Micah Parsons looks like a top 5 defensive player already. So,
hey, don't get me wrong. We talked about this last week. I love Micah Parsons to death, but I'll take Rashawn Slater in that spot 10 times out of 10 going forward.
I think that's fair. I am interested to see what the Cowboys do in terms of this class, just overall addressing the offensive line. I kind of want to get your thoughts real quick on Terrence Steele. Do you think he's the answer at right tackle, or do you think they need to address both spots?
I don't think Terrence Steele is a long-term solution. I think he can be a 2 to 3 year short-term solution, similar to what kind of Doug Free did back for us back in the day. It just depends on if we can get 2 to 3 more years out of Tyron Smith, and if you want to bolster the defense up to try to make a quick 2 to 3 year window run, or if you want to try to do something on offense, maybe like a guy like Chris Olave is there, Jamison Williams, somebody can be a spark plug for that offense, losing Amari Cooper. Maybe it's Nakobe Dean to run like a true Mike for us and kind of let Parsons do his thing. So, I mean, I think I think there's quite a bit of options there. I do love. We talked about him earlier out of A&M. Guard out of A&M.
Kenyon Green.
Kenyon Green. Yeah.
I do love him a lot, and I love Linderbaum a lot as well. So, I mean, I think we have a lot of good options in that spot. I think we get somebody who's an immediate starter for us, and the pick will really let us know where the Cowboys front office is as far as a 2-year window compared to like a 4-year window, because I feel like both windows are open, but it's like which window are you going to take? So, yeah, I feel like our first-round pick will give us a pretty good insight into that.
And, I mean, it's early, but next year's tackle class looks really bad. I mean, I know that there's a lot of bloomers, but, I mean, there's a guy out of Northwestern. It's like Strongkowski or something like that. And he looks solid. He's a little underweight. He's like 297 right now. But he's like probably the top offensive tackle. And the rest of the class is very much just boomer bust type guys. Yeah, I mean, it's
on the
rough.
bright side, in a class like that, then we can maybe grab a tackle in the 2nd or 3rd round next year who could potentially end up being – because, I mean, all in all, the Cowboys, like, as much as, like, Cowboys fans like to bitch and moan about Jerry Jones and being terrible and everything, I mean, historically speaking, in the last, like, 15 years, we have one of the best, like, ran, like, front offices in the league. It just goes to show, like, we've only been bad in the years that Romo was hurt. Every other year we've been good to better than average, which I know you don't want to be as a fan, but, I mean, it's a lot better than being bottom of the barrel. So it's like it's hard. It's just purgatory. Like, you're never good enough to like make the jump, but like you're always competitive. So it's like, would you rather have a bad front office and just keep getting top 5 picks every year, or a good front office that can't like get over the hump? And getting over the hump is as easy as like a ref saying Des caught it instead of Des dropped it. Like,
I think
one of those things.
the third stage of grieving is bargaining.
Is it?
I think that's where you're at, Jaden.
I've been through all the stages. I've worked through all the stages 27 times. People like to give Cowboys fans a lot of shit. It takes a lot of faith and endurance and like just self-perseverance to be a Cowboys fan. I'll tell you that much.
Is Peter Skoronski is the name, and I mean, again, he's listed at 294 on the site alone, which probably means he's like 285 when the measurements come out. So I mean, there's still a lot of question marks.
But also,
next year's
class, that there's going to be some kid at Northern Iowa with anger issues and who's like 6'10" that comes out of nowhere.
Or there's going to be a 6-year senior at Nebraska who's never seen the field that's all of a sudden going to be a beast.
Oh yeah,
there'll be late risers like there always is.
Someone will replace Evan Neal and just be ready to be an absolute monster.
Yeah,
so I mean, there'll be guys that rise up.
Georgia A&M, Florida, Alabama, like one of them is going to have a good tackle next year. Like I can almost promise you that. That's going to be draft eligible.
Similar to your sleeper question, Jalen Armour-Davis is a guy that is probably going to be like a 2nd, 3rd rounder. So I can't really list him as like a 4th round or later sleeper. But, I mean, everything I've seen on tape for him is just absolutely phenomenal. The one game where he struggled.
You got a 1st-round grade on him?
I have a 1st-round grade on him, yeah. It's definitely higher than a lot of people. A lot of people think, 2nd, 3rd rounder. Some people, I've seen the debate that Josh Jobe is better than him. I don't think it's even close at all. The one game where he struggled was Cincinnati, and that was just due to some injury that he sustained, I think, prior to the game. So it was just him kind of dealing with injuries. But I mean, he moves extremely well.
I think that's part of why he's fallen. I think he's dealt with a few injuries over the years, Armour-Davis. But
yeah, and
I mean, he's got some serious traits.
But I think he's an absolute stud. I think he's someone that he's not going to go in the 1st round unless like someone in the NFL is as crazy as I am. But I mean, I think if he went in the 1st round, yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people would roast the pick, but I would not be one of them. I think it'd be an excellent choice. I really like the guy, and I want to preface this by saying I know it's absurd and it may not even be my final take, but at the moment, I wouldn't hate the idea of saying he's better than Derek Stingley.
Hey,
okay,
I'd be okay with Derek Stingley dropping to the Cowboys.
I'd be okay with him dropping to the Patriots. I think Stingley's good. I just think Armour Davis is very good.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
I have a question. Who's somebody who's getting a lot of love, maybe like a top 20, top 25 guy, like a Drake London, in my opinion, who you think isn't that good, like Drake London?
Well, I'll go for the kill from the quarterback class. I think Kenny Pickett does not have the makings of an NFL quarterback. I mean, you look at his traits. I mean, they're solid, but I mean, comparably physically, you're looking at a guy like Joe Burrow who has fine traits. Like it's not like he's like weak, but he's definitely not someone that blows you away with his arm talent. He wins with his poise, with his toughness in the pocket, with his ability to kind of like
Joe Burrow
read the defense.
is just like a stone cold killer. Like
Absolutely.
we talked about it a lot during the season on the podcast. Like there's just something about him that doesn't go away.
Yeah, and for Kenny Pickett,
he's got it. That's all there is
Kenny
to
Pickett,
it. He's got
I don't
it.
see that. Yeah, for Pickett, I don't see it. I think the consistency from play to play is definitely an issue. His deep ball kind of fluctuates at times. He makes some nice throws, but at times there's plays where he just completely misses the mark. He bails on pretty clean pockets. I don't think he's going to be the QB that a lot of teams are expecting him to be. A lot of guys have kind of touted him as like
you think he's Zach Mettenberger?
The comparison I made for him preseason was I'm blanking on the name right now. He was the Miami, Ohio QB that was like supposed to be this first rounder, and then he just completely fell.
I know
to
you're
like the
talking
fifth
about.
round. Let me see if I have it still written down here. I changed it because I mean there's still a lot of potential.
Well, right, and like if that was preseason, and
it was
that was before Pickett had a big breakout.
But let me look.
I'm guessing
quick.
you don't.
I mean, I see a lot of Mitch Trubisky in him. A guy who throws on the run really well and can get people excited with that, but is just missing some traits.
I mean, people forget that Trubisky got drafted before Patrick Mahomes.
You never let me forget, Jaden.
I'm assuming you don't agree with me that do you like Drake London?
I think Drake London is solid. Like I'm not someone that dislikes Drake London, but I think when you look at the way the NFL is going, when you look at how people are winning in the NFL as receivers, Drake London isn't necessarily up in that tier.
See,
I mean, if you're offering me guys like if you're offering me guys like Wilson, Jameson Williams, I'll easily go with them.
Okay, so we're on the same page then. I'm not saying like Drake London's like a scrub or nothing.
Yeah,
there's just a lot of other guys I would take before him. I mean, he basically has to be Megatron for his size to work. Otherwise, I would rather like you said, like a Jameson Williams, even a George Pickens. I would probably prefer over him. And Pickens is getting mocked as far as late as third round, and Drake London's. I saw a mock earlier where Drake London was going number 9. I was like, that's insane.
I think one of the hardest things when it comes to making these draft boards or like rankings is like assessing the values. Like Drake London versus George Pickens in a vacuum, you may kind of be like, okay, I take Drake London, but like if you're saying take Drake London at 15 for Philadelphia
15.
or like 46 for George Pickens, I think a lot of people would say, okay, I prefer George Pickens there.
Yeah, I'll take the value. And
exactly.
That's what it's more about. It's like there's a lot more value with Pickens at 47 than there is London top 20. And I've seen London top 20 and damn near half the mocks I've looked at. And for me, I just don't see it. I mean, I think there's a lot better talent on the board. I think every year wide receiver just keeps getting better and better in the draft. It's becoming almost an expendable position at this point. So it's like he has to be Calvin Johnson. Otherwise, his skill set, he doesn't really translate to anything else. So it's like it is the definition.
If he's not Calvin Johnson, he's Michael Pittman, which is a good player.
Or Corey Davis.
But it's not a top 10 player.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Davis went before Patrick Mahomes too, so he's good. But yeah, I mean, I would give me Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, all the other receivers before Drake London, in my opinion. And if he's there in the second round for me, and I can take him out of more of like this guy's here, like that's nice value. But top 20, I'm not seeing it. And he's like the number one guy for me that I don't see the value at all.
I could see that. Yeah. Probably another guy that I have that kind of thought on is, let me pull up my rankings real quick. One sec. Sorry. So Tyler Smith is a guy that's kind of gotten this first round hype, and he and Raymond are two guys that they could easily work out, but I think there's a lot to be concerned about when it comes to them as draft prospects. Tyler Smith is probably going to be someone that you're looking to be a power offensive tackle or offensive guard. I think he and Raymond probably both project better as guards in the NFL, but a lot of teams are looking to draft these guys at tackles, and I have question marks about them on the outside. They show issues. Raymond's more athletic, but he has issues with length and just overall play strength. Tyler Smith has that play strength, but he has some huge issues with handling speed on the outside. I think the late first tackle class is going to be a huge show of just what the NFL looks for in the offensive tackles, who does better at developing this talent, because, I mean, guys like Sean Ryan, guys like Tyler Smith, guys like Bernard Raymond, Abraham Lucas has kind of gotten rumored to be up in that range. I mean, there's potential here, but at the same time, there are plenty of flaws, and it's going to be an issue of, that rookie season is going to be bumpy, but who can really turn these guys into long-term starters, and who's going to be, taking these guys and then 3 years later saying it didn't work out, we need to go back to the tackle pool, and maybe as a result, hurting their quarterback's performance in that same kind of domino effect.
Sounds like a Bears move.
So
I love Bernard Raymond as a project if you can afford it.
See, I hate a 25-year-old project. I like Tyler Smith because he's 21 in a project.
Yeah.
I don't like Raymond because he's 25 in a project, and if he takes 3 years to develop, is he getting a second contract? Like, I mean, it's just it's a big question mark for me when you're taking a 25-year-old player who's raw.
To me, if you can get the best out of him in 2 to 3 years, sign him to a contract early. So you re-sign him after like year 3, after he like maybe goes off like year 2 or something, and then 5 years down the road, like 5 years into his career, he's done with his contract. Like that's like best case scenario. But in that scenario, he's also like an all pro for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
It's such a
27 through 30. So, I mean, but I'm saying, like, if you can afford to take it, like, if you can afford to take the risk, like, I love the upside on him.
Yeah. Maybe I'm being an ageist here, and this is a hate crime, but, like, I worry about a guy who's that raw at 25. I love his story. I love his background. He's one of the most interesting prospects I've seen in a while, but the age is just too much for me to overcome.
Yeah.
I do think with Raymond,
I'm probably going to enter the draft next year, and like people will say the same thing about me. But like, I got a lot of, I'm like the Energizer Bunny, man.
I'll pick you, Jaden. I'd pick you.
I do think with Raymond, the upside is a little bit more intriguing, just because he's been so not involved in football for most of his life, to where there is a little bit of upside in terms of just learning the game. But I mean, it's such a weak like baseline for me, but I don't love the length. Guys with under 33-inch arms scare the shit out of me at the offensive tackle position, and that's something that does concern me for Raymond. He does have
especially raw guys who don't have the length, because they don't have the hand usage, they don't have the timing down. Like, it's
confidence is so big for rookie development that, like, if he's struggling, like, there could easily be issues where it just kind of works into chaos rather than working into development. Yeah. So that's something where I do get concerned. I do think that the age 25, like, it's bad. Like, there's no dancing around it. Like, that's not the age that you're wanting in a first round pick. But I do think that with his background being so new to football as a whole, there is a little bit more promise. Similar for Malik Willis, actually. He has 3.5 years as a starting quarterback in his entire like lifetime. Maybe he played in like youth football, but high school and college together, he's only started quarterback for 3.5 years. So despite being like an older quarterback prospect, I do think being new to football kind of helps, to where that there's a little bit to kind of cover with. But I mean, some of the later round guys that I like in that tackle class, Max Mitchell out of Louisiana seems pretty good. I think he moves really well. But again, he's a right tackle, so you kind of have to question, is he going, like, if you want him to be your left tackle for some teams that maybe have that opening, can you move him over? I think Braxton Jones and Dare Rosenthal are guys that can kind of potentially be those guys. Rosenthal's like 280 at the combine, though, so I'm really kind of unsure about it. But he's got the length, and he has some nice moments on tape. Just some question marks of, can you grow him? Well, let's go.
He had some
like a
Dare
Rosenthal.
Combine. He was like where was he at before Kentucky? He was at LSU. A big program, and he had some off-field issues, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he got kicked off LSU, or like it was one of those things where like he had gotten suspended and then decided to transfer shortly after or something. So definitely some question marks in that regard. And maybe he's one of those guys at like 4th, 5th round. But I mean, I do think that the traits are there. It's just, can you get his body right while still maintaining those traits?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that if you're playing at LSU or Alabama or Georgia or, one of the powerhouses, the traits are all there,
Yeah. Kelvin Joseph. So I've just been too lazy to look this up. I've thought about it a lot of times. What happened with Malik Willis at Auburn that he left to go to Liberty?
Yeah, so there was a quarterback competition. I don't know if I buy it because Bo Nix was the hot freshman 5-star. Like, I think he came in with all the expectation of starting. I don't think Malzahn necessarily was like, oh, Bo Nix is starting no matter what. But I think there was a lot of favor in regard to Bo Nix being like the guy. So if you're not starting him, then there's a lot of concern from, outside chatter, from boosters, from situations like that.
So you just kind of get like forced into being the starter so he can go play at Oregon in 3 years?
I don't want to say like, oh, Malzahn just started Bo Nix because he was forced to. And I don't want to like come off as like I'm making excuses for Malik Willis. Malik Willis probably could have won that job if he performed better. But I do think that there was a large advantage in Bo Nix's favor to where I think that him winning that job was a very uphill battle. And I do think that Malik Willis, I mean, there's still a lot of rawness to his game. He's being drafted as a project. He's not being drafted as this guy that's like, oh, he was such a superstar in college. At Liberty, he had some games that were bad. And, I mean, not even just the games where he went against like an Ole Miss where his whole roster is just completely outmatched. Like, he just had some games where he did not perform well. So, I mean, there's still some moments where he needs a lot of development. And I can understand where, maybe a school like Auburn, maybe Coach Malzahn was like, hey, both these guys have upside, but one is, the hyped guy, the guy that kind of keeps the boosters off my back if it goes wrong, kind of, supposed to be the superstar and savior of our thing. And so I think it was an unfair quarterback matchup. I think Nix was probably given a heavy hand to win that job. And I'm not saying that Nix didn't earn it, but I'm just saying I think he had the advantage in that battle. But I think it was one of those situations where it wasn't as tried and true as like, oh, he lost to Bo Nix.
I wasn't too familiar with the story, but like Auburn Twitter is like in love with Willis. Like, you look at Auburn Twitter and they like Malik Willis runs like a 4.1 according to Auburn Twitter. Like, he's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so I was always just like, I didn't know what had happened there. I didn't know why he had left. I didn't know the reasoning behind it. I didn't know if it was the Bo Nix situation, Malzahn situation.
Well, Malzahn actually he helped Willis get to Liberty, I believe. I was reading that yesterday or 2 days ago that he was a big reason why his relationship with the coach at Liberty is what got Willis there.
Yeah, he was a former SEC coach who got fired because of the off-field stuff more so than on-field.
Was it Freeze?
Yeah, Hugh Freeze, one of the premier coaches, but just a little bit too much money going into the stripper fund. But I assume the connection there and just the idea that he was working with a coach that had the pedigree was a big reason why Willis was able to, find a home at Liberty and be comfortable in that. And I think it did help him a big chunk being able to kind of be the star player there rather than being forced into probably not being like a handoff machine, but he probably wasn't going to be the focal point of the offense at Auburn if he did end up getting that starting spot.
Hugh Freeze is a great story, man. He goes out there, he preaches every Saturday. He go out there and preach the word of God, and then have a $100,000 stripper pole or stripper tab at the end of the year. This is an incredible story. Just complete SEC, like to the T. Like, it just every like stereotype you could think of for like SEC, like, is Hugh Freeze in a nutshell, and I love it.
So what are the Patriots doing in the draft?
See, I just released like a Patriots mock draft today, and I had them going Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. But man, I had a lot of Patriots fans yelling at me how dumb it was of a pick. A lot of people want corner, which I think is perfectly reasonable. They seem to be changing in terms of just overall scheme. They're heading more towards zone. I think they realize that while man coverage can be tremendous in a lot of ways, I think it kind of hurts when dealing with more mobile quarterbacks. So they're trying to bring in zone corners who can face more towards the QB, be ready to react to scrambling QBs, be able to kind of adjust to roll out passes, situations like that. So they seem to be heading more in that zone direction. So guys like Andrew Booth, guys like Kyler Gordon are very much in play. But I think cornerback or interior offensive line are the big positions of need. Offensive guard more so than center, but I mean, it's still Bill Belichick, so I wouldn't be surprised if after this first round we're drafting someone who just doesn't really fit anything of need and more so just, Bill being Bill and just picking who he wants.
I think personally
Billy B.
They should go kicker in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Folk is getting up there in age. I'm sure Bill Belichick's just thinking to himself, let's get ready for the
we just
need
a solid kicker. We just need a solid kicker. Hey, it's a third of the game, man. If you can solidify 33% of the football game with one pick, like, by golly, you got to do it.
Speaking of specialists, I mean, this is an insane punter class. Matt Arise has gotten all the attention.
Matt Arise is
Jake Camarda is an extremely talented punter as well. Jordan Stout out of Penn State, another guy. I think we could very easily see 2 punters drafted. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 3, potentially even 4 punters drafted in this class.
I mean, I'm all for it. The Bears need a punter.
There we go.
So I think that's all we got for you, Michael. We really appreciate you jumping on and talking some ball with us.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on. Real quick, talking more draft prop bets. If the Jets don't trade for Deebo Samuel, I really like Jameson Williams top 10. I don't think Charles Cross is going to be the pick at number 9. I think that's been a very common thing. But the Seahawks follow this very easily findable formula that's called TEL. And the only guys they draft are over 3. Charles Cross doesn't meet the criteria. So don't be surprised at Trevor Penning, Tyler Linderbaum, Cameron Jurgens, or Cole Strange being one of those Seattle weird picks. Yeah,
you thinking the first for Cam Jurgens or Cole Strange?
I don't know if it happens at 9, but if Seahawks trade down, maybe they switch with Pittsburgh to get to 20. Don't be surprised if it's Jurgens or Strange at 20.
Interesting.
They pulled the trigger on Jordan Brooks a couple years ago.
Yeah, they always pick
no one had him in the top 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be weird drafters. I still don't expect that to change.
Jameson Williams top 10 is a lot.
I think Jameson Williams is the pick at 10 if they don't trade for Deebo.
Let's go.
Okay.
I think he's such a good scheme fit. A lot of people are mocking Drake London. I think Drake London's been the common mock pick, but he doesn't fit that San Francisco offense. He's not your yards after catch
Jameson
guy.
Williams is perfect. Especially
Jameson Williams, especially after you just saw what Miami traded for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Getting that speed and open space is such a benefit to this offense. Jameson Williams fits perfectly.
And an ACL tear in 2022 is nothing.
Yeah, he's already going to be back by training camp.
Yeah, he's already doing some stuff on it. He's going to be
ACL
good.
tears are about to be 1 week deals in 2 more years from here.
Modern medicine, shoot.
We are all educated doctors.
Yeah.
Hey, I love Jameson Williams top 10 though. That he's my favorite receiver coming into the draft pre-injury. He's still up there. It's him, Chris Olave, and Garrett Wilson are my 3 that I think are top 3. It would be Jameson Williams number 1 if he wasn't coming off injury. But yeah, I still love Jameson Williams a lot.
Yeah, I'm between Wilson and Williams. They're almost 1A and 1B. I think those are absolute studs.
I got Olave and Wilson with Williams just a notch below him just because of the injury, because there is still just the slightest of uncertainty. But you take away that, and he's right up there with Olave and Wilson for me.
I got you. I just wanted to add that in. Sorry to add on a little bit more.
It.
Hey, tell the people where they can find you, Michael.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at MR_NFL draft. My initials, I'm not trying
Mr.
to,
NFL
yeah,
Draft.
trying to take advantage of the brand, but
Yes, sir.
ultimately mostly just plays into my initials. But you can find me on Twitter there. You can find me at Orange Bloods. There's a YouTube channel. There's the Rivals website itself. You can find me
Hey,
at the
we're gonna
2 Minute
saw
Drill
them. We're
YouTube
gonna saw
channel.
them horns off one of these
Oh
days.
no.
Yes, sir.
I know.
We'll get there
I know
eventually.
there's some Texas Tech fandom here, so I
Yeah.
gotta play it. I gotta play it safe. But yeah, you can find me at orangebloods.com, LandryFootball.com. I try to do shows twice a week. Sometimes work gets in the way, but still able to find me there for a little bit. I think it's coming to an end though pretty soon. But find me on Twitter. Find me at 2 Minute Drill on YouTube. I'll be all over. Hopefully, continuing to grow in the draft industry and
Yes,
making a name
sir.
for myself.
Well,
All
hope to
right,
see you
folks,
back.
go follow him. Go like his stuff. Go learn something about these prospects. Thanks for coming on,
Absolutely.
Michael.
Thanks for
Yes,
having
sir.
me. I
Thank you.
appreciate
Have
it.
a good one.
All right, take it easy. All right.
What a guy.
Now I think we have a little NFL news to talk. Yeah, great guy for coming on talking ball with us. He puts out some great stuff on these prospects, and I
Yes,
love
he
his
is.
concept of the 2 minute videos. I think that's outstanding. The amount of times I've gone to YouTube and started a video of like a prospect breakdown and rewound it over and over and over is
Yeah.
countless.
It's just so monotonous and so tedious. It's hard to do. So he does a good job of it. So definitely go check him out if you got a chance.
Yeah. Let's jump into some of this NFL news. Every wide receiver in the league wants to be traded because Jacksonville
Jaguar.
screwed everybody.
Jacksonville just hates the league. They gave a big FU middle finger to the entire NFL and said, we're going to go pay a mediocre receiver top tier money. So all of your receivers want to leave. So maybe we'll end up with one of your guys. So maybe this is their plan all along. They're just like,
I mean, maybe it's just a diabolical, crazy plan that might just work. That's where
Yeah.
I'm leaning.
They're like, if we can convince all the top receivers that they're not getting paid enough money, maybe we'll get a top receiver. So like,
or at the very least, they won't have them.
yeah. I mean, incredible foresight for the GM there and everything. So
Trent Baalke did it again.
Kudos to them because Christian Kirk absolutely destroyed the market. I'm still under the impression that wide receiver is expendable. I don't care how much these guys are getting paid. It's all going to come. I mean, we just talked about 7 guys that are going to go in the first round. Possibly there'll be another 7 guys next year, another 7 guys after that. How many years can we have 7 guys go into the first round before people are like, oh, maybe receiver is not that important? Like,
I mean, I generally agree with the sentiment. It's just a question of when we hit that breaking point. Like how many guys is it going to take before it's like the league kind of shifts, and until that happens, wide receiver is going to be one of the highest paid positions in the league.
Oh, it'll be high.
It's insane.
It'll continue to be the highest paid, but it's at the same. It's gonna come down to is, for instance, let's throw somebody out there who's good, not great.
Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay. It's like, do we pay this person top 5 money because that's what the market dictates, or do we just walk away and go find somebody else? And
Speaking
I would
of
say
which,
in most cases, I would cut my ties and either work through free agency or the draft.
Speaking of which, the Amari Cooper trade is looking like a steal right now for the Browns.
Yeah,
he's getting paid. He's getting paid like a mid-tier receiver. It's great.
Yeah, probably should have held on to that one for a little bit, but I mean, I didn't hate the trade when we made it.
No, I mean it was a fine move. I mean the Cowboys kind of were handcuffed, so they didn't really have much of a choice.
I mean they were kind of stupid to leak the fact that they were like gonna cut him. Like that definitely hurt him. But I mean, if you hold on to him for a week longer than they did, we might have got a second round pick out of him or a first round pick
Yeah.
out of him.
Seriously
Or
though,
just
like
the fact
someone
that
would be like, "This is crazy. I'll just go get that contract."
yeah, like maybe the Chiefs like go like, oh, we'll give you a second round pick for him. Like,
Yeah. But it's insane. Where's Debo gonna go?
Debo, he's gonna go somewhere where he doesn't fit, and
Yeah.
so Debo's incredible. Don't get me wrong. Kyle Shanahan's also incredible. So it's always hard to know what's what in that situation. But Debo is Cordell Patterson, is he not? Just with a lot better
Oh, he's
person
a
scheming him
lot
up.
better than Cordell Patterson, though.
Well, same type of player though.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, so I think Debo's a
not
number
great.
one anywhere.
I
His
don't think
production
Debo's
will
great
not
at any.
be
I
as
don't.
good as San Fran or outside of San Fran, but I think he's still a
Yeah,
number one receiver.
I don't. I guess technically he's a number one receiver. I just don't think he's great at everything. I think he's just good at. He's good at everything, not great at anything.
Yeah,
If you're asking me, and so
yeah,
he has to be the focal point of your offense, and to be the focal point of your offense, he's got to go somewhere where they don't have a whole lot of offense, and the first place that comes to mind would be like Detroit, Washington, maybe a New England, something like that. Because like he can't go somewhere where there's already like either a number one receiver or like a clear cut number two guy who like Brandon Ayuk is
See, I
like
don't know.
a
I
pretty
think
good
he would
comp to him.
feast. I think he would feast with a number one guy across from him.
I don't know. Maybe I just didn't watch enough Debo Samuel, but to me, in my
I mean,
opinion,
I
he's
agree with you. I don't think he's great at anything, but I think he's good at everything. But I think that's the type of guy who would destroy with a number one option across from him.
see. I think Debo is one of those guys who gets better the more touches he gets. So you have to get him the ball like 14, 15 times a game, one way or another. And it's like, how are you
Yeah,
going to do that when you have another number one, or you have a top paid running back, or whatever the situation is? Like, there's not enough snaps in a football game to like fit him in with another top flight guy to get them both in a rhythm. So like you're building your offense around Debo Samuel if you trade for him, essentially.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
In my
My
opinion,
main
maybe not.
concern,
Maybe not. Maybe he
my
can play
main
off the ball.
concern with like trading valuable picks for him is his injury history and his play style. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it could be fool's gold at some point with a guy who's I think broken his foot twice and runs very hard. Like, you know, contact is a big part of his game,
And he
and
gets
he's
better
not a
as the
guy
game
who's
goes on.
consistently stayed healthy with
Yeah.
it.
And he's a guy you have to get involved early. I mean, you can't. He's not a guy you can like save to the fourth quarter. He's one of those guys like
Yeah.
you trade for him. He is going to be the focal point of your offense. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he goes. But if I'm trading for a young wide receiver, I'm going to get AJ Brown.
Oh,
That's
AJ
just
Brown
me.
is definitely the number one target out there. Like, I mean, talk about a guy who's stayed healthy for the most part. He had some injuries last year, but I mean, he has just been dominant on the field, like in every aspect.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
So
I think so highly of AJ Brown.
Debo can probably do more, but I feel like you can throw AJ Brown into any situation, make him the one, make him to the two, make him the three. It doesn't matter. Just throw him on a team. The team's going to be better. And he's not a guy who requires the ball every throw. He's a guy
Yeah.
who just makes the most of his touches, and he's going to make the most of his touches every game. And I love AJ Brown. If I'm
Okay.
gonna go trade top assets for a young guy, I'm going to get AJ Brown.
So, moral of the story here is Jacksonville fucked us all.
They did. Um, watch Christian Kirk be a 5-time All-Pro, future Hall of Famer. All of a sudden, with Trevor Lawrence out there slinging that rock.
I don't buy it.
I'm not.
Also in news today, Jay Wright has retired.
R.I.P. R.I.P. in peace to Coach Jay Wright. Very classy. Some piece of shit coaches that you'll see announce their retirement like a year early so they can get this big retirement, like suck off tour where everybody's like, oh, this is the last time we're gonna play Jay Wright. No, he's like, nah, I've been the best coach in college basketball for the past 25 years. I've had the best basketball program for the past 25 years. I'm just gonna make a Final Four run, not make a big deal about it, not make it all about me. This is about my players, this is about my program. I'm just gonna go out on top and just retire in a very classy fashion a couple of weeks after the national championship so he doesn't take away any smoke from the national championship winner, Kansas Jayhawks. Just very politely just steps away. And I mean, that's how it should be done. And any other coach that does it differently is just kind of a piece of shit, in my opinion.
I mean, obviously. I mean, it seems very clear to me. Jay Wright's a class act.
Yeah.
That those other guys who do it the wrong way.
Yeah, there's another guy down there on Tobacco Road that is 85 years old and still dyes his hair jet black and thinks nobody notices, that wanted to make it all about him and have a year-long retirement tour, but I'm not going to name names on Coach K. So.
Anyways, what's up with Baker Mayfield?
Mr. Bitch Boy Baker?
Bitch Boy Baker.
As a Tech fan, I'm required to dislike Baker. I really don't dislike Baker. I've always kind of liked Baker. I don't think he would have stayed the starter at Tech anyway. Like even going on to win the Heisman at Oklahoma and make the national championship, he didn't have the talent to remain the starter at Tech. You look at that roster, and I mean OU's roster was infinitely better than Tech's, but you look at the quarterbacks and Tech. He would have been buried on that roster. He got a lucky shot. He got a lucky break. Had a great season with Tech, and it propelled him to OU. And I wished him nothing but the best. I wish he wasn't such a dickhead and didn't talk so much shit about us, but that's okay. But I still think he can be a good to above average quarterback in the NFL. I think.
Oh, he can get to the playoffs. He was the right spot.
He was incredibly accurate in college, which is weird because he hasn't been in the NFL, and that's usually something that it either translates or it doesn't. And usually accuracy is one of the easiest things to translate to the NFL because it's accuracy is accuracy. And we saw it with him and Josh Allen. Josh Allen got more accurate. Baker got less accurate. Rarely see it.
So
don't know
that's
what
where
it is. But okay,
wide receiver separation, offensive system. You went and watched Baker. He wasn't making the toughest throws in college.
But let me defend Baker
he was
for a minute.
throwing. Okay,
4 OCs in 4 years, up and down.
Jay Cutler did it.
Technically, had a wide receiver room where you had so many star-studded players. It's like, who do you get the ball to at what time? Because I'm sure OBJ was
what a terrible problem to have.
Hey, I'm just saying, as a young quarterback, when you have 3 guys who could be the star of a team all wanting the ball, it's like, who do you get the ball to? It's almost like when you have too many options, you have no options type deal. I'm just trying to defend our boy here for a minute, dude. We were the biggest Baker Mayfield fans for 8 games at one point in our life. Come on, you got to give him a little bit of love.
Yeah, no, I'm just giving you shit.
But at the end of the day, I think he can be good, and I think given the right opportunity, he is linked to the Steelers. The second he gets cut, supposedly the Steelers will sign him immediately, which I would love to see. I would love him to stay in that division. He's obviously not going to Cincinnati. And he's not going to Baltimore.
That was a bad bet.
Damn. I did hear him today linked to the Cowboys as a backup, which makes no sense unless he went there willingly. So I don't know, but I hope he lands somewhere. I hope he lands on his feet. I hope he does good for himself. He's already made a lot of money, so he's good there. But yeah,
Yeah,
good for him.
I don't think he's going to go hungry.
Could be a draft day trade. That is one thing to keep your eye on. Draft day trade for Baker. Maybe a guy that's like, or maybe a team that's looking at like a Kenny Pickett is like, well, we can get Baker for like a 3rd-round pick. Let that ride instead of taking Kenny Pickett at 17 and see what happens from there. You never know. I would probably take my chances with Baker Mayfield over just about anybody in this draft other than Malik Willis.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I still can't believe that Sam Darnold got a 2nd-round pick. Like,
Yeah,
if he got it, Baker's got to garner that. Like,
the only thing wrong with Baker is that you have to pay his 5th-year option if you trade for him, or you have to extend him, one of the two. And it's like,
but that was
at
the
this
same
point,
with Darnold.
no.
Or I guess 1 year removed. But they did give him the
Darnold,
5th-year option.
Yeah, they chose to give him the 5th-year option afterwards, but it wasn't like, so Baker's already going into his 5th year.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
you have to
That
pay
was
that
the same
option,
draft class.
which is very, very expensive, to where they're like, well, let's just make Cleveland pay for it, and they'll either have to cut him but I mean, I think somebody will scoop in, and it'll be like an Amari Cooper type situation where it's like, oh, that's all they got for him, but it's like, hey, it's
Yeah.
better than cutting him.
We'll give you something.
Yeah. And I
All
also wouldn't
right.
be surprised if it's like a week 3 or 4 trade either, for maybe a quarterback goes down. I mean, I always thought he would be perfect on the Colts. Like, I think that Colts situation would be absolutely phenomenal for him. So maybe Matty Ice doesn't work out going into week 5, and it's like, hey, let's go pull the trigger on Baker because this team's too good not to.
That would be something. That would be something. All right, real quick, just going to shout out to go to the website, shaving-points.com, click on the draft guide, and go learn everything that I could possibly fit into an Excel sheet about 328 different players, and look at the consolidated big boards, look at the player strengths, player weaknesses, player comps, athletic testing, injury history, what else? Just personal facts about them, and then a definitely not made up fun fact about them.
Definitely not made up, and it's a really good. It's a really, really good way to like burn a day if you're like sitting in your office in a cubicle or whatever. I mean, Thursday or Friday, like you don't have a lot going on, but you got to act like you're busy. Just staring at a computer screen all day. Just like your boss is going to walk by and be like, man, he's really working hard for a Friday. And you're just looking at the draft guide. It's perfect.
Looking at the spreadsheets.
Yes, sir.
It's also got team needs, every team's draft picks outlined, potential targets for every team, their top 20 potential targets.
And it has a trade machine.
Let's see. A trade machine. It will calculate your trades on 4 different models. On the Jimmy Johnson model, on the Rich Hill model, on the Fitzgerald Spielberger model, and on the Harvard model. It will tell you whether you won a trade according to these 4 different systems of accounting for it. And it will also give you college stats for these guys. I have college stats specific to each position for a ton of these guys. It's all right here. Here's the trade simulator.
You can have so much fun. I mean, you can, like I said, you can literally spend an entire day on it.
What's really fun about this is like this trade that I mocked up in here. According to 2 of these models, the Bears win this trade, but according to 2 of them, the Falcons win this trade. So you can really play around with it and try to see like which model you agree more with, which one is one that you really feel like is representative of a fair trade or not more, and see those differences. Like, according to the Jimmy Johnson model, this is a pretty fair trade. But according to the Spielberger Fitzgerald model and the Harvard model, the Bears are kicking the Falcons' ass in this trade. So there's very different viewpoints on it. And then, Cupcake, why don't we roll down to the stats, the quarterback stats. Should be down at the bottom there.
Is that not it right there?
There you go. That's it. So you got like big time throw rate in here, turnover worthy plays, adjusted completion percentage, and then more standard stuff too, like yards per attempt or touchdown to interception ratios. And Caleb Ellaby, watch out for Caleb Ellaby and Dustin Crum. If you're about falling in love with some sleeper quarterbacks, the stats say those guys are your guys.
Don't sleep on Kent State quarterbacks. Julian Edelman's maybe a Hall of Famer. Who knows?
Oh yeah. So yeah, go check it out. Go play with it. There's so much I can't even explain in this summary of what all is in there. You just need to go experience it. It's a lot of fun to play around with. If you open it, all your wildest draft dreams will come true.
And if you're watching this live and celebrating the holiday, this is a really good document to just get lost in.
Yeah. And it also features a scouting report on Bobby Boucher, also known as the Water Boy.
Hey, that's perfect. Well, I'm so excited for the draft. We're 8 days away. It's the best time of the year. I'm pretty sure I've said that the last 6 episodes in a row, but this is the best time of the year.
It's the most
late spring.
It's the most hopeful time for every NFL team.
And we got NBA playoffs. We got NHL playoffs coming up. You got baseball starting. You got Kentucky Derby coming up. You got golf every weekend. You got NFL draft, where if you're an NFL fan, this is our year. This is our year, baby. This is the year for my team. This is the year where we're going to make the picks that win Super Bowls. Every year is your year, brother. And this
if you're lucky,
year.
If you're lucky, your GM will move up to the top of the first round, just trade out of the top of the first round and come away with David Putney.
Absolutely. So just remember, NFL fans, this year is your year.
Especially the Lions.